What's up, guys? This is Kephas, and we are hanging out in an Ice Crown Citadel because I felt like going on a little bit of a nostalgia run. I like to come back here from time to time and redo this place, just not really for anything. I've never really been one to go after Invincible or any specific gear items. I just like to come back here because I like to run this raid because it's probably my favorite memory of WoW. I had the most fun in this raid. I had the most fun during this era of WoW. And I just felt like running it while I talk about what I'm going to talk about, which is Nostalrius, or however you say it. There are really a lot of sides that you could look at this from. I mean, I don't really want to get into the whole legal debate and go into a courtroom mode, because honestly, there are so many different things that you hear people say on both sides of this one, and it's just like Nostalrius was not fair use. That's not how fair use works. And Vanilla WoW, even though it may or may not be abandonware, it's really not. But even if it was, Blizzard has the copyrights to WoW. They can do what they're doing legally. Legally, Blizzard is in the right. I'm not defending Blizzard. I'm just saying that from a legal standpoint, they're not in the wrong. But that's not really the issue, is it? It's more about public relations. It's more about, being good to your fans and your customers, and that's a different issue. If you want to talk about that, I think that we can talk a lot about that, because I sincerely believe that the people that were behind that server they weren't making money. They weren't trying to make money, and they were doing it out of the love for the game. And I think that is well represented in the people that played it. People played it because they liked the game. It wasn't because they were trying to rip anybody off. They had their server and they were enjoying the game. There were a lot of people that were playing live and playing on Nostalrius. And there were some people that were a lot of people that were playing on Nostalrius that had no interest in coming back to live ever. So I don't know that it's easy to say that it was messing with their profits, but I don't know. There's so much that I can say that's speculation there. It's just one of those things. But here's what I will say. My issue with Blizzard on this topic, and the reason why I so strongly side with Nostalrius, besides the fact that I too would love to play an old server. I would like to play Vanilla. I would like to play BC. I'd like to play Wrath as they were at the time, because there are a lot of games where I can do that. You can't tell me that I like Ocarina of Time because of nostalgia, because I have it sitting over here on my desk in my N64 right now, and I've been playing it, and I've been having a good time. None of the old WoW as it once was is available. I mean, you could say, yeah, you can go back and play it. No, you actually literally can't play Vanilla as it was. And even though you can go back to BC dungeons and stuff and Wrath, you still can't experience them as they were at the time, because the game has changed so much from beginning to end. And you just cannot experience that stuff on live as it was at the time. And we don't need to argue about whether or not the game is better now, or whether or not it was better then. We don't need to argue about whether or not it was nostalgia or whatever. It doesn't matter, because it's all about personal preference. I think the game was 1,000 times better back then. And I think that arguing that, well, it had all these bugs, doesn't take away from the way the game was played. And yes, was it more inconvenient? Sure. But it doesn't matter, because here's the thing, guys. It doesn't matter if the game is riddled with bugs and is inconvenient. If it's fun to play, if it's enjoyable otherwise, if it gives you something that you really appreciate, you like it. Versus live, which is you sit in your garrison, you go to one place, sometimes you might raid, and you don't do anything. I mean, I don't log into live other than to do a video for YouTube or to raid anymore. And that's why obviously it's enough for me to pay them for now. That might change, but I used to log in all the time. Back when the game was so horrible, I played it a lot, and I had a lot of fun. So we don't need to argue about whether or not it was good. You don't need to ridicule people for liking Vanilla. You don't need to ridicule people for liking Live. People aren't wrong for liking Warlords of Draenor. People aren't wrong for liking Vanilla. People like what they like, and that's the end of that discussion. There is no need to debate that further. Gamers need to understand that people are going to like different things, and they're not wrong. Some people like Call of Duty, they're not wrong. Some people like Overwatch, they're not wrong. That's just the way it is. Some people think that Diablo 2 was better than Diablo 3. Some people think Diablo 3 is way better than Diablo 2, and neither one of them are wrong. The only person who's wrong is the person that ridicules the other person for liking what they like. Let people like what they like. And that's where Blizzard has made their mistake, I think. A couple years ago at BlizzCon, there was an interview. Well, it was a Q&A. They do their Q&A, and someone asked this question.
Have you ever thought about adding servers for previous expansions as they were then?
No. And by the way, you don't want to do that either. You think you do, but you don't.
And that was the response that was given by developer J. Allen Brack, who's very high up on the WoW team. Dude, here's the thing. Like, I don't want to be mean. First off, I would never let him do a Q&A again. Like, there are certain guys that are community people that I think are great at being community people that don't do it enough and should be doing it more often. The vast majority of the dev team, see, there's a difference between the dev team and the PR team, okay? Most of the development team should not talk to people because they suck at it. J. Allen Brack comes off, I'm not saying he's like this, I'm not saying he's a jerk, I'm just saying that in this specific instance, he comes off as the most condescending douchebag. I mean, this guy was asking a legitimate question. He wasn't complaining, he wasn't griping, he just asked a question. Are you thinking about bringing legacy servers?
No. And by the way, you don't want to do that either. You think you do, but you don't.
You don't tell people what they do and don't want, okay? Because number one, a lot of people are proving you wrong because that's why you had to shut down Nostalrius. Because 150,000 people were playing it on a regular basis. People are downplaying this server's size because it's not 10 million players. Well, understand it's a private server, right? It's not marketed, so people only found out through word of mouth, through the internet, for what it was. That's pretty big. And people say, well, it was free. That's true. And there's a good chance that a lot of people wouldn't pay $15 a month to play vanilla, but also consider that because it was word of mouth, and because it wasn't an officially backed server, and it might seem shady to some, and it violates the terms of service, there were probably a lot of people that were interested in it, but didn't want to touch it, kind of like me. Also consider that there are more than one private servers out there. Nostalrius isn't the only one, there are many others. So before we go into like, well, is it financially beneficial to them? I mean, you know, will they make money? There's a good chance that they might. Who knows? You could ask that about any business decision a company ever makes. When they made WoW from the beginning, do you think they're going to make money from Overwatch? We don't know yet. Will they make money from vanilla? How would you possibly know that? No one can know how much money a company is going to make on a product that they haven't released yet. People are remaking HD games all the time. They're re-releasing games. Nintendo re-releases their old titles all the time, and they make money off of them all the time. So it's not unheard of. But that's the nice thing about those games, is that when you want to go back and play them, whether it's for nostalgia purposes or whatever, you have access to them. So there's no need to sit here and argue and speculate over, will this make them money? You could ask that about any product any company ever makes. That's silly to speculate over that. That's the problem with most of these arguments, whether it's for or against, they're dumb. They're almost non sequiturs. They provide nothing. The bottom line is, whether you like it or not, there are a significant number of people out there who have an interest in playing old school content as it was when it was released, because they're not happy with live. A lot of them aren't happy with live. Some of them are happy with live, but would still like to go back and check out the old stuff. One of the things that I thought was interesting was that Mark Kern, former team lead for Vanilla WoW, doesn't work for Blizzard anymore, actually went to the petition for legacy servers. There's a petition. I'll have a link to this petition in the description if you want to sign it, for legacy servers. And he wrote a letter, an open letter to Mike Morhaime, to Blizzard, and it basically said, you know, don't punish people who are fans of your work for being fans of your work. And he basically encourages Blizzard to embrace the idea of legacy servers. And his idea was actually interesting. Basically, as I understand it in the letter, and tell me if I'm wrong, his idea is outsource the servers, kind of like how other games do. You know, like you think about like Minecraft, you can have a private server. You know, you can pay for a private server. Ark, you know, has that same system. Counter-Strike, TF2, a lot of games have where you can kind of host your own server. And doing that, you could, you know, well, I want to have a vanilla server, or I want to have a BC server, or I want to have Wrath server, whatever expansion you want to play. And you can go back and play it at the time. Charge people a fee or whatever, or don't. Provide servers and allow people to pay I don't know. See, that's the thing, is I don't know what they can do. That's not my job. it's weird. Issues like these kind of people show their true colors, like the community, because issues like these you'll see so much bias, and I mean this on both sides. I mean, there are people that are so white knight pro Blizzard. People will ridicule people for giving negative feedback, which they call complaining, and they'll say, if you're going to complain, then why don't you unsub? But then if they unsub and still give feedback, they'll say, well, you're not playing, so how do you know how the game is? You're not even playing it now. That's the circle logic they have. This is how a company works, okay? When they develop a product, right, the first thing that you figure out is how much is it going to cost to provide this product. Cost is everything from labor, so development, paying the developers, paying everybody, the admins, paying the community people, everybody that you have to pay that's behind this. You have to consider studio, how much does that cost, materials, computers, server costs, all the things that go in development time, everything that goes into producing a game, and you put all that in, you add all that up, and you've got a cost. And then what you're going to try to do is try to decide on what your target profit margin is for the product that you're selling. But here's what you guys don't understand. You people that get mad because people complain and they're trying to give feedback and say, I don't like the way the game is, and now half the player base is left, and you continue to say, well, if you don't like it, leave. Here's the problem, guys. Every person that leaves lowers that profit margin for Blizzard when it comes to WoW. And no, you can't offset that with Heroes of the Storm or other games, because that's not how business works. Every individual product needs to sustain itself, otherwise it's not good business practice. So you can't offset the cost of WoW with Heroes of the Storm or Hearthstone, because then technically those games aren't making you any money, right? And it's Blizzard's job to make money as a company. So every subscriber that leaves WoW, they lose money. The profit margin, the profit percentage goes down. So if they were getting like a 500% profit margin, and then you cut that in half, roughly, it's down to 250%. And as people continue to leave, it goes down, and it goes down, and it goes down. And guess what happens? When it goes down, you have to do one of two things. The first thing that you should try to do is find a way to bring it back up. In other words, find a way to get people to come back. One of the things that they did was charge more for the box. You guys that complain about paying more for the box, but then tell people to quit complaining and leave, the reason why you have to pay more for the box is because people are leaving. You morons. That's what you don't understand. So the more people that pay, right, the more money they're making, the more they can do. So if they can't raise that back up, if they can't get more people to subscribe and the profit margin continues to decline, then they have to cut costs. That's the next thing. So that's when developers are getting laid off, right? They have to cut costs, so developers get laid off, or community people get laid off, or people are, like when they had to lay off a bunch of people a few years ago, or they had to cut servers, lower the amount of servers so they can cut back on maintenance. But then that looks bad to investors, so they don't want to cut servers. So what's the next thing? Well, we're gonna have to cut content from the game. We won't have as many patches. We'll have one patch, and then you're gonna complain about less content. Because why? Because people are leaving the game. And the more the game begins to suck and the less content it provides, more people are going to leave the game. And guess what? Those of you that like the game, that ridicule people for giving negative feedback because they don't like the game and they leave, and then you're in the minority because the majority of the player base is left at this point in this expansion, right? So if that continues to happen and more people leave, guess what? You're not going to have a game anymore either. And before you say, oh, shut up, there are MMOs out there that have a 10,000 people or 100,000 people. Yes, but they don't have the costs that WoW has. Because of the quality that WoW is and because of the size that WoW is, they don't have the same costs. And when WoW goes below a certain profit margin, it becomes useless to that company to continue to produce it. And before you think it can never happen, it can happen. It happens all the time in business. So I would not discourage people for complaining. I would not discourage people for giving ideas like legacy servers. I mean, if they bring back legacy servers and that takes people, maybe they're going to play live, and then maybe they might switch to legacy, and then maybe they'll play that for a while. But if it keeps people in the game, who cares? If that's what you got to do to keep people playing, playing the old game is better than not playing at all. And that's what it's come to for a lot of people, because the current game sucks. Garrisons suck for people. The current game is not the same as the game of old. Everybody knows this. Like, literally, think of it like this. I want to wrap this up with this. There was a game, back in the N64 days when Rareware was a big popular company. Rareware back in the day was a lot like Blizzard is. They were loved by everybody because they made games like Donkey Kong Country. They made GoldenEye, a lot of games that people love. They also made Banjo-Kazooie. And Banjo-Kazooie is one of the most beloved games on the N64. Okay? And then they made Banjo-Tooie. And by the way, Banjo-Kazooie was like one of the best 3D platformers ever made. That was back during the era when 3D platformers were just all over the place. And I love 3D platformers. I wish I could play more of them. But then we didn't get a Banjo-Kazooie game for a long time. And Rareware got bought out by Microsoft. Okay? So then they started making games for Xbox. And so they finally released a Banjo-Kazooie game. And it was called Banjo-Kazooie Nuts and Bolts. It looks like Banjo-Kazooie, right? It's kind of weird because Banjo is like all fat now, and it's like they're doing something weird. But you can control him. He controls really well. It kind of feels like Banjo-Kazooie, and then all of a sudden you get into the core gameplay. And before they get into the core gameplay, they ridicule people who they say, "Oh, people don't like 3D platformers anymore. They don't want to do collection anymore. That's not what gaming is anymore." And they say we want to do something different. They actually say that in the game. They break the fourth wall and say that in the game, and then they introduce cars. And Banjo-Kazooie Nuts and Bolts, it's not a platformer, it's a lame car simulator. You build cars and you do a bunch of car you spend half the time in the menu building a car, and it's awful. What does that sound like to you? Menus, menus, menus. Seriously, not to be cliche, but this is turning into World of Menucraft. World of Warcraft, nuts and bolts. Here's your garrison. Spend half the time looking at a menu. That's not what old WoW was. People aren't getting what they want from the game, but they don't want to give up on the game. They want to hold out for the game to get better, or they want to go play the old game when it was good to them, when they enjoyed it, when it was compelling, and they feel they can continue to enjoy it because at least playing the old game is better than nothing. I don't like Legend of Zelda Skyward Sword, but I love playing Wind Waker still, and I go back to it all the time. It's not just nostalgia. It's because it's a good game, and it's a game that spoke to me. And that's how Vanilla and Wrath and BC were for me. But not Warlords. I would love to log in and raid with my buddies in Warlords because the raiding's fun, and then go back to a legacy server and do that. I'm not saying that it is or isn't a good business decision. I'm not saying that they don't have the right to shut down Nostalrius, whatever. I'm just saying, as a gamer, that's what I would like, and that's my opinion. And I don't think that any company who cares about their player base, like Blizzard used to, and is showing signs that they don't as much, I don't think that they should punish fans for loving their game. Because that's how I interpret the situation. And if there's any way that they can come to some kind of compromise, I think they should. And if there's any way that they can provide these servers, without telling people, and if they legitimately can't, and there's a good reason why, don't be condescending and tell people, no, you don't want it. Because obviously people do. I'm not saying that live can't be fun again. But if they're going to go in a different direction, then let people who like the old school game play it somehow. But it's not going to go away. I don't think it's going to go away at this point. People won't let it, and I don't think they should. So I'm behind legacy servers all the way, and that's my thoughts on the topic. Thank you guys for listening. I hope this answers your questions. If you have any more questions, leave them in the comments section below. Sign the petition if you want legacy servers. It's there, and it's growing, and it's being supported. So thank you guys. Have a wonderful day. This is Kephas. I got the Invincible track. That's awesome. That was a fun run. Alright, you guys have a wonderful day. This is Kephas. Until next time.